everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Tori. Thank you for being here. So every so often I have somebody reach out to me who recently got diagnosed with lupus or some other form of autoimmune disease that is similar to lupus, just asking for preliminary advice. Preliminary, that's hard to say. I have like this terrible allergy attack yesterday, and so I'm like still recovering. So I don't know what it was. I like walked by these bushes outside the post office and suddenly couldn't stop sneezing the rest of the day. My throat was raw, like it was really rough. So I'm still like recovering from that, weirdly enough. So anyway, every now and then I have somebody reach out to me saying, hey, I just got diagnosed with lupus. What advice do you have for me? And so I was talking the other day and I realized I actually do have a lot of advice for people, and it's all stuff that I wished somebody had told me when I first got diagnosed. So I just want to share that in this video. So the first thing is, this is probably the worst it's ever going to be. Now the reason I say that is because typically when you are diagnosed with a life-limiting illness, not necessarily life-shortening, but I do believe it is life-limiting, where it's like, you're not going to live the same way you'd always planned on living because of this illness. It's easy to fall into deep depression because you realize this isn't going to go away. This isn't just something that you can outgrow like you always thought it was. It's something that you're going to be dealing with forever. Now, the reason I say this is probably the worst it's ever going to be is because you are going to find medication, you are going to find lifestyle changes, you are going to find ways to work with this, and it is not going to be this bad again. Now, there is the possibility and probability of an occasional flare where it will get bad again, but you are never going to not know what it is again. You're never going to not know how to fix it again. Right now, the part of your journey starts that is going to lead you to answer after answer. What are my triggers? What foods do I need to stay away from? What lifestyle changes do I need to put into place to make sure that I am staying away from flares and triggers? So just know that it's not going to be this bad again. Like this is as bad as it gets. My next point is, you're going to have to start being strict with food and sleep. Now, most people diagnosed with lupus are young, in their 20s. And so typically people in their 20s are not very careful with sleep, they're not very careful with food. And so this is going to be a restriction that you're going to have to learn how to manage. It's really good to have a set bedtime. That's not saying you can never go out past your bedtime or anything, but for right now, while you're getting everything under control, it's really good to be like, I'm going to be in bed by 9 p.m. every single night, no matter what. But just being strict with yourself there is going to be really important. Also, being strict with foods that are known to cause flares, or even known to cause flares specifically with you, it's really good to cut all those out. Next is sleep as much as you can and also move as much as you can. Pretty much the worst thing you can do is just lay around the house all the time. If you do lay down, try to sleep while you're laying down, and then if you do get up, try to keep moving. Now, if your lupus is anything like mine was, where it has a lot to do with joint pain, this can be excruciating, but it will make you better. Movement is going to make you better. So I'm not saying go lift weights, I'm not saying go for a marathon, even, go for long walks or anything like that, but just pay attention to how much you're moving and try to do it more. Another thing I want you to be aware of, it's going to take a while to get to a good place. Now, I'm not saying a place of remission, because some people never reach remission, but to get to a place where you feel like you can ease up on all those restrictions that you had for yourself. You're going to have to figure out the right medication. Oftentimes that will take months, because a lot of these medications, they don't start working for 2 or 3 months, which is really frustrating, because sometimes it takes 6 months on a medication to figure out it's not going to work. It hasn't worked, it's not going to work. And then you switch to a new medication, you have to wait for that to kick in. And on medications, just so you know, most side effects go away. So obviously if you have like an allergic reaction or suicidal ideation or something really scary, you probably want to get off that medication pretty quickly. But if you're having like headaches or upset stomach or something like that, usually that's just your body trying to get used to the medication, and it will go away. I'm on 3 long-term medications, and all 3 of them had side effects at the beginning, and they don't have side effects now. I haven't had side effects for years, because typically after 2 weeks to a month, your body gets used to it and all those side effects go away. Another thing is, ask to see a specialist and make sure you like your doctor. There's a reason why rheumatologists deal with lupus. They have to do a bunch of extra schooling, they have to do internships, they have to see a lot of rheumatology patients. And so if you go to a doctor who happens to have a lot of people under them that have lupus, that is not going to be the same thing as somebody who is specifically trained in lupus. Definitely ask to see a specialist and make sure you like them. I had to change rheumatologists at one point because the rheumatologist I was seeing, I didn't like her. Like, we didn't see eye to eye on a bunch of stuff, and I just really didn't feel comfortable with being in her care. So I switched. That was something that my hospital, they did have 2 rheumatologists on staff, so I was pretty lucky there. If you have the option, definitely stick with a doctor you trust, a doctor who will listen to you. There are certain medications that I refuse to take, and I still to this day have not taken them. And I had one doctor who didn't listen to me, and he was basically like, well, if you don't take this, you're gonna die. And I was like, well, I guess I'm gonna die. And then another doctor who was just like, okay, well, if you're not gonna take that, let's get creative, let's figure out something else. And so, definitely stand your ground. Like, if there's something that you are absolutely not comfortable with, let them know and speak up for yourself. There have also been other things that I haven't been comfortable with initially, and I just asked like 50 million questions. And then I got comfortable with it, where I was like, okay, well, you know what? Let's give it a shot. That's totally fine. And those are actually medications that I'm still on now, and I'm very grateful that I took them, namely Benlysta and hydroxychloroquine. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is just disclosing your illness. There's a reason why HIPAA protects medical information, and it's because it's one of the most personal things to us. Now, autoimmune diseases typically are invisible illnesses where nobody from looking at you could tell that there's anything wrong with you, unless there's something very visible, like you're on crutches or you're in a wheelchair or something like that. But even that could mean injury and not necessarily anything very wrong with the person. So first of all, you don't owe anybody anything. Obviously, if you have a partner or you're living with family, they're probably going to know because they knew about your symptoms to begin with, they knew about your doctor's visits, and then now they know about your diagnosis. I'm not really talking about that, but if you have family members that you don't live with and you don't really trust their reactions, you don't have to tell them anything. You are not required to disclose it to your employer, unless your employer is like the military or something, then they have to know. But in general, if you just have like a general employer, because you work at like a marketing firm or food service or something like that, you're not required to disclose it to them if you don't have any certain accommodations that you need. Also, in the age of social media, it's very easy to feel like you owe people this truth. You don't. This can be something you tell them about years later. Just because you have lupus doesn't mean you have to like start a YouTube channel like I did. You are allowed to be as private as you want with it. And it might be something that, you live with and you manage and everything, and then it just kind of comes out in 5 years where you're like, you know what, I don't feel like I need to hide this anymore. I'm comfortable talking about this openly. If you do choose to share it, a lot of people are going to have a lot of different reactions. There are some reactions that are like, oh wow, I had no idea, I'm so sorry, do you need anything, like how can I help? And that's one of the better ones that you can get. Other times people are like, you don't look sick. Well, you've never called in sick for work. You can run just fine. And it's almost like they're in shock, and so they're trying to talk you out of it, which is always interesting. But that is a reaction where people are uncomfortable with the truth, and so they're trying to make it better really fast. They're not trying to make it better for you, but they are trying to make it better for themselves. So just know that when you go in and you start talking to people. Also, if anybody has like an aunt or a sister or cousin who has lupus, they'll probably tell you about that too, which is totally fine. They're just trying to relate. They're not trying to like deviate from you. Also, people's experience is really the only experience that they have. And so if they had an uncle who died of complications due to lupus, they'll probably tell you about that and be very worried that you also are going to die. If they have a family member who went into remission immediately after getting diagnosed, they'll probably be like, oh, you're going to be just fine. They went into remission pretty much immediately. So just know you're going to get a lot of different responses, and I would highly encourage you, if you are at all raw about the diagnosis, which I know I was, I know probably a lot of people are, keep it to yourself until you're ready to face those different reactions that people will have. Also, there are triggers that are like universal, that have been studied over and over again to contribute to lupus flares. Wheatgrass, melatonin, stay away from them. Absolutely stay away from them. Now, this is tough if you're trying to be healthy and you have like this greens powder. Most greens powder has wheatgrass in it. And so it might be the type of thing where you're like, oh no, this is to keep my health up, but it's actually slowly making you worse. So pay attention to that. And a lot of times lupus and other autoimmune diseases cause sleep disruptions. So if you're taking melatonin all the time, quit it. Like, stop, ask for a different medication. And most doctors are totally fine with prescribing some kind of sleep aid, but just pay attention to those. Another thing that I wanted to say, this is like being way longer than I thought it was gonna be, is that everybody's different. You are going to have triggers that are totally different from somebody else's triggers. The sun isn't a huge trigger for me. It is the number one trigger for other people with lupus. It's also a good thing to keep some kind of symptom tracking journal. This isn't necessarily to figure out triggers. If, it does figure out triggers, that's absolutely great, but then you kind of have to also track the input, not just the output of the symptoms. But just notice, because sometimes, I know after I got diagnosed, sometimes I would feel a certain way 100% of the time, and then it would be like I would only feel that way 5 times a week. And that doesn't sound like a big improvement, but it is good just to track your journey so that you can see small improvements along the way. Because just seeing that tracked is going to be a huge encouragement as you go along. Another thing too is a side effect from a lot of lupus medications is depression and anxiety. Also, one of the symptoms of lupus is depression and anxiety. So, even if you go completely in remission and you're still experiencing anxiety and depression, don't be hard on yourself. That's just something that comes along with the territory. That's totally fine. Highly encourage you reaching out to a mental health professional. Even if you choose not to do medication, there might be some over-the-counter things that you can take that can help it. I know there's some supplements that definitely help it. Or if you decide that depression medication is the best thing for you, absolutely do that. But just so you know, it's, because it's easy to think, I'm finally better. I'm finally pain-free. I finally have energy. Why am I feeling so depressed or so anxious? It might be the medication. It might just be your autoimmune disease. And it's totally fine if that happens. Go easy on yourself. This is a journey. It's a marathon, not a sprint. So just keep at it. And I hope you guys are doing okay. Best of luck. Bye.